Good morning. Well, what a pleasure. What a pleasure it is to be before you guys this morning. I'm going to finish up my talk on that note to let you know how special you are and how much of an honor it is for me to be part of this process. I'm not a real football fan today. I leave that to my wife and my daughters, but I think for the purpose of giving you a little idea of who I am, how this came about real quickly, and the message of the plan that Heavenly Father has for us all. I call it my 13th season. So I'm going to talk about that for a little quickly, and then I'm going to finish up with the special message to you that I think is important that you recognize and understand that this is very unique. What you do this time in the history of our country and in the world, and I'm going to kind of bring all that to play toward the end here. I enjoy talking about what I call the 13th season, and 13th season basically it kind of goes back to my beginning. I grew up down south during a very special time, a time that I'm very happy I took part in, with a family I'm so happy and proud to be a part of, and a race that I'm also very proud of. It was during the time when we were trying to overcome the prejudice of our fathers in the 60s. I remember in the 7th grade, I was standing in a line in front of the Florida State Theater because we could not go inside that theater at the time. But it was a special time because I look back decades later and I'm so proud of who we are, because we will always look to become our better selves if given time. That's who we are. That's the Americans we are. And it was such a good time for me to begin the process because in my 10th grade year, I don't know how many of you guys remember seeing the movie Remember the Titans. Well, that was my experience. 10th grade year, there was 4 black athletes integrated in this once all-white school, Rutgers High School. And it was a very interesting year. It was one in which we were surrounded by a bunch of guys the first week or two and promised that we weren't going to be there, we weren't going to last. And I remember the commitment the 4 of us made to each other that we were going to see this thing through no matter how tough it got. And it got somewhat tough at times. I still carry scars from that year. But what came out of it was really interesting because we did hang in, we showed our value, we stayed tough. And by the time the year finished, not that everything had become honky-dory, but by the time the year finished up, we had guys that at one point didn't want us there, didn't like us for whatever reason, that respected us because we hung tough, we didn't quit, and we provided value. And there was a second part of that, and that is we saw ourselves different. We saw ourselves through the eyes of people now who respected us, and we respected ourselves even more because we had made this commitment to each other, and we hung tough and stayed through. Well, my next year, my junior year, was a little different. The focus on the color was still there, but not quite as strong, because we found something else that we loved even more. It's called winning. We love this feeling of winning. And it got to the point where we began to think more about how can we work together to win than anything else. And we were a winning team that year. We were good enough to get to the state playoffs. I had one game in which was the best game of my entire athletic career against a crosstown rival. I won't get into the details, but it played a big part later on. This one game on my junior year was one I can always reflect back on. So we got to the state championship, didn't win, but being the young, cocky young people that we were, we figured no big deal, we'll come back next year and we'll do it. We'll make this thing happen. Well, as life happens, everything fell apart. The team, many of the players that were key players, including myself, got hurt. Team fell apart. The harmony that we had began to dissipate, and it became a disastrous year. The year before, I had college letters coming in, and all these options I had. Well, my senior year, nothing was happening. As far as I was concerned, I didn't know I was going to play football anywhere. So I came up with this great idea. I said, since no one else is recruiting me, let me see if I can find a place I can go to that might take a look at me. So I looked at the University of Miami. Now, a couple things happened with why University of Miami. I grew up in Tallahassee, Florida, and one winter it got down to 32 degrees in Tallahassee. Now, that's cold in Tallahassee. It was cold enough for me to say I cannot go any further north than here. So between that and the fact I wanted to do marine biology, and I figured, well, this is a place I can go down south and close to the water. Let me see if I can get down in that direction. Well, I went to my coach, and since I didn't know what else to do, I said, Coach, I'd love you to send some information down to Miami to see if they have an interest. And he was inspired. He took that one game from my junior year, a year earlier, spliced it, made that the focus, and sent it down to the University of Miami. And they thought this was the latest and greatest Burgess Owens. Sent me a ticket to come down, and I signed as quick as I could before they figured this whole thing out. Now, I knew nothing about Miami. This is before the internet. This is for, listen, guys, I wasn't trying to figure out which best school to, based on my football prowess. I just wanted to go somewhere. So I didn't know that Miami was one of the worst teams I can go to if I wanted to play football. I was just happy to play anywhere at that time. So I went down to University of Miami. It was not the university that many of you guys think about today. Most people think of Miami as a national championship winning team. Well, it was, by the way, the first U, just so you know. I know, just in case there's any, we were the first U. But at the time, Miami couldn't win football games. It was a great place for the best teams to come to go to the Orange Bowl and have fun in the sun and win their game and go back home. But it left us with only 2 or 3 games a season winning. And this went on for 4 years. So when I ended up my senior year in high school at the beginning of my 13th season, I'm now into it. 4 years at the University of Miami, not one winning season. Now, what I did learn, though, very, very important lesson, is I learned to become an eternal optimist. I learned that you come to a point in life where you have to make a decision. Do I keep fighting forward, or do I quit? And if you keep fighting forward, you have to find a reason, something that will keep you motivated. And my motivation was, it has to get better than this. Next game, next year, I know it's going to get better. And I got so much into the habit that every year, this expectation came. And though I was disappointed every year, I realized the next year has to be better. Well, we went on for 4 years, not getting any better. So I went on to the Jets. And by the way, I call those 4 years at the University of Miami my character building years. I was drafted to the Jets, and I had another 7 years of character building years. My graduate program of character building years. For 7 years, not one winning season. And I look back, I reflect on that now. I know it's only a game. It's only a game. It's not earth-shattering. It doesn't change the world. But when you're in the middle of it, your blood, sweat, and tears, and your self-esteem, and everything's built on winning. And you're watching your buddies go to Super Bowl games and playoffs, and here, once again, you're home early. You kind of get depressed. You get a little down. And I remember the 7th year with the Jets, I was really getting a little bit down. And I think back on that. Isn't it interesting how we all are in this sense? Here we are. We have some of the greatest blessings that in the history of mankind. We live in the freest world, the freest country, where we get up every single day and make decisions of how we're going to attack that day, what we're going to do for ourselves, what is our future going to be like, what is my dream about today. And yet, we get depressed by those little things that just don't go right for us. Got stuck on I-19. It's 1915, I'm sorry, I'm just getting I-15. Little things that we really sometimes forget how blessed we really are. Well, that year, we wanted to kind of decided to do my best, continue on, and I was traded to the Raiders. Now, for those who are young in this room, do not have gray hair yet, at one point the Raiders was a winning football game. They won a lot of football games. They really were. I can remember being on the sideline, on the other sideline with the Jets, playing against the Raiders and saying, man, it would be nice to be with those guys, as they're beating us, of course. Well, I had an opportunity to get with them. This was the 13th season. We're not supposed to be a winning team. It was kind of a rebuilding team, but things just happened. The synergy was right. We had the right attitude. We had many of us who were so desperate to win that we just gave everything we had and more. And we not only had the first winning season since high school. I went to the first playoff game since high school. And lo and behold, here we are sitting in the locker room getting ready to go out to play a Super Bowl game. It was an unbelievable experience for me to go ahead out there, and we end up beating the Eagles in Super Bowl 15. And that was the highlight of that 13th season. The only thing that we regretted as a team, because we had so much fun, is we had nobody else to play. The moral of that story, though, is this. Each and every one of us are promised a 13th season. There'll come that day, that point, that year where everything is worked out the way you'd hoped, that everything you've gone through is worth it, that this moment is one that you will always remember for the rest of your life. It might be a college experience, it might be a family experience, it'll be something that you say it was worth every long night that I went through. But that season will only come by going through the 12. And those 12 of the years, the times, the seasons where you wonder, how in the world did I get here? How did this happen? How can I get out? What can I do? How can I turn this thing around quickly? Because it's very painful. And just know everyone goes through it. That's where you grow. That's the character. That's the humbleness. That's the faithfulness we learn. It's through those tough times. And though I wear the Super Bowl ring, I can highlight, and I only wear it when I come out, by the way, it diminishes in value with time. But it gives me the opportunity to talk about the 13th season, about that last year in high school, the 4 years in college, the 7 years with the Jets, where you're trying to figure out what can I do to turn this thing around. And to that note, I do want to talk about the camera because this is really a part of the process. You see, when you're not winning, you can't look to the scoreboard and say, this is where my self-esteem is. You can't look there to depend on feeling good every single Sunday. You have to find something else. And for me, I learned a long time ago, I'm going to find the camera. The camera is going to help me to define myself as a winner. Now, in NFL, the way it works is you have a camera that records from the sideline and a camera that records from the end zone. And it's in practice and on Sundays. And we practice 6 days a week and 5 days a week. We then play our game. Then we have one day in which we take a break, come together as a team, and just review what we did. That camera, by the way, doesn't shut down. It doesn't turn off. It doesn't care how you feel, if you're tired, it just shows. It records your attitude and your actions every single second of the game. That's all it does. Well, what happens on the day after the game, after we've lost, we come together as a team and it breaks up in squads. And I have a chance to break up with about nine of us, 9 defensive backs, and we look at these films. And I began to realize that if I can come out of that room, that locker room on Monday, not Sunday, on Monday, leaving that room with 9 guys, and my teammates knew there was a guy who didn't quit. He played every single second. He gave us all. That I can walk out of that room feeling like a winner. Now, how does that play out in the real world? And I said the real world, in a real game. Well, we were playing against the New England Patriots in New England. They have a tradition that they did, I don't know if they still do, of firing off this cannon every time they score a touchdown. Well, the score was 53-3. They were winning, of course. A lot of cannon fire this day. And I often wonder, why is it that I think back on this particular game with all the games I've played, but it plays so big in terms of this conversation we're having now? Because with 2 minutes left in the game, I remember vividly I remember the day. I remember how sunny it was. 2 minutes left in the game. I look up at the scoreboard, and it scores 53-3. And automatically, in my mind, goes through this thought, what can I do to change the game around? Now, of course, you can imagine it didn't change anything. Nothing changed. We lost. Surprise. But my thought was important. My actions, because I felt that way, was important. Because though I was thinking about those 9 players that coming Monday that I wanted to make sure they were proud of my actions, at the same time, there are Oakland Raider coaches watching those games. There's the owner of the Raiders, Al Davis, watching those games. And they saw a guy that wouldn't quit. They said, maybe he can help us out. Maybe he can be a part of our organization. And what turned out to be playing for the benefit of 9 players, my teammates, ended up playing for millions of people in Super Bowl 15. And today, if you ever go back and get a film, I'm still there, number 44, running around in the Super Bowl. Why? Because of 9 players I wanted to impress to show that I was a winner. That camera is on at all times, guys. Heavenly Father loves us enough to know that every single second of our life counts to Him. He has a perfect plan. If we come to the point where we recognize and appreciate the blessings, the plan becomes very obvious. I can look back now on my growth, my upbringing in Tallahassee, Florida, as a black Baptist, to where I stand today. And I can say that none of this was an accident. My opportunity to meet Todd and Kathy Christensen, a player who had been cut from the Dallas Cowboys and the New York Giants, just happened to be a Raider, like we all were, was not an accident. Sometimes we're asked, I've never really asked, but very few times, we talk about the Super Bowl year, very few times I've been asked, what happened the next year? Has anybody ever wondered what happened after the Super Bowl? Anybody care? Well, as we do when we win and we become victorious, we became fat and happy, literally. Came back out of shape. We had our rings, though. We showed up at the football field with our uniforms on because we were the Raiders and we were supposed to win. Went to the very bottom of our division. A very humbling season. But what they had a chance for me to do was see how someone responds during those times. I watched Todd respond when things weren't going well. I watched him respond when things were going very well. And through a 3-year process, we became friends. So the time came that I had those questions. The bond was strong enough that I trusted his answers. I knew there was no agenda. If he didn't know the answers, which he, I'm going to just take 1 second to say it was one thing. If anybody knew Todd, very intellectual guy. And it was this one point before baptism where I had some concerns about the priesthood, the blacks in the priesthood. I wish I could develop this, but since I can't, I'll just dive right into it. I was up all night one night, 4 o'clock in the morning, reading the Bible, which I hadn't picked up in about 20 years. But I wanted to get this answer, and I wasn't getting it. So my wife called Kathy, and Kathy very dutifully sent Todd over. To Todd, Satan's after Burgess, get it, go over and help him out. Well, Todd came in with his books. All of them, packed to the door. This is before practice, by the way. We're on our way to practice about an hour later. He comes with all his books. And so we have a very intellectual discussion. And of course, it didn't work. But 2 nights later, and this is the point I wanted to make to you guys, 2 nights later, I was sitting with the mission president. And I'm sure he knew what we were going through. But we're sitting at this end of this table. In my mind, all these years, I've seen in my mind this long table, and Josie and I and the mission president are sitting at this table, and everybody else was down the other end. I almost see this in slow motion with the lights kind of brightly showing on us. I realized when I talked to Kathy a few months ago that we're all sitting together. It wasn't a long table after all. They were hearing the same conversation I'm hearing. But the mission president, as we're talking about this, not talking about so much the priesthood, he turned to Josie and he said something that changed my life. And I've said ever since that point when I talk about this concept, this process. He says, it's interesting the way the Lord works. He gives you enough to take the first step. He then asks you to take the second step on faith. Now, I didn't have any of my answers. I'm sure I got teary-eyed, but I knew then it was enough to take the next step. 4 months later, I was pulled out of Gospel Essentials to teach 14-year-old kids, which I could not believe was happening to me. And I grew within the next few months exponentially. My questions were answered because I took that step on faith. The message I have for you is this. You have been chosen. You've been picked out. There's over 100 billion people who live on this earth, in the history of Earth. There's been over 500 million that have been Americans since the 1700s. There's 15 million of us around the world. And here you sit, the bastion of freedom. I want to share this one thing here, because I think it's important to know that you are not an accident. You're not a happenstance. Of the 22 countries that have some type of democracy older than 50 years, that's in one lifetime. Costa Rica is the only one, the only Latin country. Israel is the only one in the Middle East. Japan is the only one in Asia. And here we are, United States of America, surrounded by two great oceans, east and west of us, and two free countries, north and south of us. And we truly are the light of the world. I heard of a story of this little girl in Syria. This little girl in Syria that's a member of the church. Now, no one knows it, of course. But you represent the spark of freedom and hope to people like that. That says somewhere out there, the Lord has laid the foundation for freedom. And we have a chance to experience it every single day of our lives. We take for granted. We wake up every single day, decide what time we're going to go to work, if we're going to be late or not. We make those decisions. If we mess up, we get a chance to stand right back up again without bad consequences. That's freedom. On this wall here around the temple, I read something just a few weeks ago. Wherever the Spirit of the Lord is, so is liberty. What a great blessing. Because that's God's greatest blessing us, liberty. The concept, the idea. And for us, it's more than just an idea. It's a lifestyle. But we have to fight for that. Freedom and liberty, the concept of all the years and all the many, many people who lived on this earth, it's only a few people who have experienced it. And it's up to us to make sure that more do. That we fight for what we know is the right thing. That you don't take for granted. You don't beat yourself up. You know, we have a tendency, all of us, the greatest part of our country is this. We look at ourselves, each other, from inside out, not outside in. That's what we've been trained to do as Americans. You need to do the same thing. Look at yourself inside out, not outside in. Don't look at the flaws, the mistakes. We all make them. Look at the greatness. God has put within you the seeds of greatness. All He expects is you do your best to bring it out. He'll do the rest. You do your best. Don't let the doubts slow you down. I had experience before going to, I'm going to wrap up with this, I had experience going into the Super Bowl game. It's one of reflection. I remember sitting there in my uniform, and after all these years of losing, looking around the locker room, and of course, those who remember the Raiders of those days, it was an all-star group, some of the best from across the country, from different teams that either were bad boys or too old or too rowdy. They, whatever it was too much for other teams. It was just right for the Raiders. And I remember looking around the room and saying, gosh, I don't believe I'm sitting here. What an opportunity. I'm actually sitting here with these guys and with a chance to win the Super Bowl. Well, because I have had a chance to study the history of the world and a little bit history of the country, I say the same thing to you guys tonight. I'm honored to sit with you. We have a sacred duty. We made decisions before coming here, and so far we've upheld that decision. There are many, many millions and billions of people who need us. We represent that spirit of liberty. We represent the hope the Heavenly Father wants everyone to have. So we got to step outside our comfort zones to get there, to do it. Just know that you're given all the tools you need. You have everything you need. Just put the effort in to make it work. I love this gospel. I love the opportunity that we now have to live in this valley. I love the fact I've come to this valley, buy a home, to find out that my next door neighbor is the first cousin of my missionary 30 years ago that baptized us. I love that I can, because of a good deed of a stranger back on the East Coast to help us to move, and I made a promise. I said, Paul, when I come back out there, I'd love to talk to your sacrament. I'd love to talk to your ward. As I sit down, getting ready to speak to his ward, what I didn't mention about this mission president, he didn't make it home. He passed away 3 or 4 weeks later. The one who gave me that great message. And for years I tried to reach out to find his family. I just couldn't find them. And I sat down to get ready to talk to the ward. And this man comes in, sits down next to me. He's a stake president. As we started talking, he asked, when was I in Oakland? I said, well, my dad was in Oakland at one point. I said, was your dad the mission president? I've learned that the term tender mercies since I've been out this way. And that was true tender mercy. Of course, my talk changed. The talk that I planned for the ward that morning changed totally. And next week I'll be talking to the youth of his stake. I can go on and on, guys. The Lord has a plan for you, has a plan for me. He's going to put just the right people and just the right obstacles. Know that's part of the plan. I know you don't want that. You would love not to have that part of it. But how can we be humbled if we don't go through the process of being humbled? How can we be faithful if we don't learn how to stretch out and find faith? So unfortunately or fortunately, we got to go through it. Just know your 13th season is already planned. It's already there. He knows our hearts. He knows our intents. Work on that. Work on our thoughts and our heart's contents, and He will do the rest. I bear my testimony that this church is true. I bear my testimony that we have been chosen for a special time, a special place. We're in the bastion of freedom. And we have thank goodness, we have the understanding of what that means because we live it. And I'm so thankful that years and years ago, 30 plus years ago, there was a young couple that befriended us that had the courage to ask those questions. Have you ever thought about where you came from, why you're here, and where you're going? And we were honest enough to say no. We thought about it, we have no idea. And I pray that as we continue to team up and use our talents, wherever they might be, that we all understand that we will have a victorious season. It is already spoken for us. We just need to make sure that we're on the field of action, not on the sideline, not spectators in the bench in the wherever people watch from. We're asked to be on the field, and you are a starter. You're an all-star, and I'm proud to be part of this process. Thank you for everything you do, and just know that you're appreciated by many of us who know that it's not as seamless and easy as it looks. I leave that with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.